How does the rapid evolution of technology affect the lives of our older adults? In a world where a new gadget appears every day, how do our older adults keep up, as well as our family caregivers and senior living communities, and why is it crucial that they do? Guiding us through this fascinating and vital topic is my guest today, Vida Roozen, Chief Operating Officer at the Smarter Service. With over 2 decades of experience in consumer technology and a personal journey that has deepened her understanding of the tech challenges faced by aging adults, Vida brings a wealth of knowledge and a unique perspective to our conversation today. The Smarter Service, renowned for its personalized tech concierge services for older adults and senior living communities, stands at the forefront of this field, championing the cause of tech literacy and digital equity for our older adults. Today, we talk about the world of technology literacy among older adults. We explore the growing importance of tech and ensuring independence, connectivity, and a thriving lifestyle for seniors. It's not just about having the latest devices, it's about how these tools are integrated into their lives and the support available to make this integration seamless and empowering. We talk about the challenges in bridging the digital divide, the role of caregivers, and the crucial need for a shift in our approach to tech education for our older adults. Here is my interview with Vida Roozen. Vida, I always love opportunities when we get to visit. It just feeds my soul. So happy you're here. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, I feel the same way, Nicole. I'm so happy to be here.
I want to learn, and I want my listeners to learn a little bit more about you before we dive into, oh my gosh, tech literacy and all of the opportunities that come along with being educated about technology. So tell us more about you. How did you get to this space and want to create smarter?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I actually come out of the technology space. I was working with brands for many, many years, helping them train retail sales associates on how to sell their product to consumers across the country. And so one of the things that was frustrating to me in that experience was that there's a ton of places to buy technology and there's a ton of places to get it installed, but once you're at home, you're on your own.
Right.
And so, as I've gotten older and, I'm watching my own parents kind of navigate a world that's digitizing around them, I realize that there's really nowhere for them to go for help. And so, I've kind of taken my operational experience in building teams across the country to tell stories and build relationships and applied that in this industry in helping older adults build their confidence in navigating a technologically driven world.
Which, I mean, it is now becoming the foundation in a lot of ways of how we manage life and have experiences.
Yeah, it really is. And what's sad about that is that the handshake has disappeared for older adults who are trying to learn this new way of doing things. And it's more critical than ever. I have a lot of conversations with people on, can technology be a proxy for connection with humans? And the answer to that is no. And helping them build their confidence in using that technology requires that relationship and that curation of the experience for the individual. It's just really missing. And I think we can do better. And so that's how Smarter was born.
So excited. And we're going to dive into more of the details of that. But I think there's really a bigger conversation at play here, which you and I have talked about, and the importance of understanding what is tech literacy and how would you define it for older adults, and why is it becoming so important to have this conversation in our digital world?
Well, for me, digital literacy is just about the ability to understand technology and then making it work for you. And so that ability to navigate technology confidently is what digital literacy is all about to me. The reason I think it's so important and it's such an important part of what we're trying to do is because I see technology in 2 lanes. There's the technology you have and you want. And so you think about, your smartphones and you think about your smartwatches or your Alexas that are in the home. But then there's the technology that's done to you. There's the self-checkouts and there's the QR codes and telemedicine. And so the ability to navigate those things from a convenience standpoint is important, but from a safety and health experience, it's critical. And so I'll give you an example. Today, I'm in California and we're getting a little bit of rain, which is scary for us here on the West Coast. And I just got an alert on my phone about flood warnings. If people aren't comfortable with technology or they don't understand how to make sure that those settings are on, it can represent a real safety risk for them. So digital literacy is important.
That's so practical, right? Real life moment, how that happened today. How do we build that into our lives, right? As we're making decisions, as we're navigating the landscape of our day, how do we make this a part of our routine rather than that afterthought? Or I loved how you use that term of like, a lot of technology is being done to us, right? We're just kind of this bystander of it all happening around us.
Yeah. Well, I think that comes in a lot of different forms because technology can support in a lot of different directions. So, if you think about it as a communication vehicle, that alert that I just talked about, we saw that in Lahaina with the fires in Hawaii. Less than 10% of the population had their emergency broadcast on, and that had dire consequences for people. It can also mean, the ability to connect with family. It can mean the ability to connect with your community. It can create conveniences and food delivery services. And so, how we build that and curate that into somebody's life on a regular basis is a very personal thing. It means
Mhm.
different things to different people. And so when I think about the way that we're helping people do that in communities we're working with today, or even direct with members and the concierge that we have working with our members, it starts with a conversation and really understanding how they navigate their lives and what's important to them,
Mhm.
and then curating that technology path and letting them be kind of the writers of their own tech story. And when they have the control to choose what they want to do, they build it into their kind of
Mhm.
operational process, so to speak, and into their lives and how they navigate the world.
Yeah, I love that, how you say that, build it into our tech story
Yeah,
in our
yeah,
world. It's so true.
yeah.
There are challenges, that we face when we need to access the tech or even just have an awareness of it, specifically older adults, right? And it's ever evolving. How does this impact their daily lives?
It's interesting. I just saw this the other day. So I was at the postal service. I was sending a package out to my daughter. She's at school. And there was this sweet older gentleman, vet. I knew that because of his hat.
Mhm.
And the line was really long, and he zipped over to the kiosk to try to send his package that way. And he stood there, and I was in line because mine was complicated, so I needed help.
Mhm.
And I watched him out of the corner of my eye for about 20 minutes, just hitting buttons and getting frustrated and exiting the program and trying again. And I got through the line faster than he got through that kiosk. And so I walked over to help him. And it was a workflow issue. He just couldn't figure out how he could get the parcel sent the way that he wanted to.
Mhm.
And so, that is the challenge, is that older adults sometimes find themselves faced with this technology that's done to them for convenience, and it's not intuitive. And that can be an embarrassing experience. It can be frustrating. And so, having somebody to help them navigate that and just kind of take them step by step and give them the context to what they're seeing is incredibly helpful, because the
Mhm.
next time he does that, it's highly likely he'll be more comfortable walking up to that kiosk and have more success using it.
Oh, absolutely. You had talked about how, it wasn't intuitive to him. Are you finding that are older adults a part of the development process, or is that dependent on the company? What are you seeing in that tech landscape of as they're building products and platforms? How much is taken into consideration from the older adults' perspective?
Not enough.
Yeah, right.
And I want to be careful because I don't, there's amazing product development and amazing developers and, well-meaning people. But the thing I think I hear the most in technology is it's super intuitive. And that is just not true for everyone. And it's not even an older adult issue. Like, it's just not intuitive. I mean, how many of us have sat in our home, kind of wanting to kick the tire of that device you bought that won't connect to something else? And so it's not intuitive. It isn't comfortable for everybody. And so having the ability to access kind of patient support, you know, I watched this. I'll give you another example. There was a woman in my local nail salon that was being asked to check in on a digital kiosk. And
Mm.
she was so frustrated. And the 20 something year old behind the desk, like you could see it was visible her impatience. And this woman just didn't understand the flow of what was being asked. It did seem simple, but it wasn't for her. And
Mhm.
so solving that problem at the product development level, engaging multi-generations in thinking about your process pathways is important. I don't think we do enough of it. And we heard a lot of that at Age Tech, right? CES, of them encouraging brands to not forget about this market that's growing rapidly in their product development. But it's not an easy problem to solve.
No, it's not. And you're right. We are seeing a lot of new technology specifically for in the industry. Would you say we call it age tech? Do you think older adults and families are using that language yet? I don't know if I know that they are. No, I don't think so. Yeah.
I mean, I don't see it. I talk
Mhm.
to a lot of families and I talk to a lot of older adults. We have people working with, people in their 40s that are wanting to help their parents, or working with our members directly, and they're not using that language. It's super interesting because technology is like a thing, right? It's a device or it's a solution, but the decisions to use it are deeply personal.
Mm,
I'm worried about my parent. I want to stay connected. I don't want to feel left behind. It's interesting to me when I think about how families think about technology. They think about it as an enabler for safety, for
yeah,
connectedness, for health. And those are very personal things. And so they're not calling it age tech. I don't know if they ever will call it
right.
age tech. Like that's
Yeah,
definitely a marketing term, but
yeah,
they are looking for technology to enhance their lives or the lives of their loved ones.
absolutely. It's always that what is the solution to the problem that I want to solve? And
That's
how
right.
do I find that? Yeah. Yeah.
You said it way better than I did.
No, I loved how you explained it. It is. I love that distinction because while we have this tech, the motivating factors of using it are very personal, right? We're meeting those needs where we have it.
It's
Yeah,
love. It's love.
it is.
You're just
Yeah.
constantly trying to figure out, as a kid myself, I'm constantly trying to think about how do I help the people I care about stay independent and stay safe, in a way that doesn't overreach and doesn't
Right.
make them uncomfortable, because there's that whole dynamic
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, technology is chosen from a very emotional place, especially in families that are navigating older loved ones.
Absolutely. With that inclusivity, equity, what does true digital equity look like for older adults? Like, how does it go beyond just providing the devices and the access? A little bit more, leading from what we were just sharing about.
I mean, for me and what I believe, just kind of in my soul, is intentionality. And so whether you're thinking about it from a family perspective of how do I help my loved one, or you're thinking about it from a community perspective, it's not just about the device and the connection. It's about building the confidence so that they can use it and that they understand it. I mean, think about the last time somebody told you something that maybe you didn't know or you didn't completely believe or you didn't understand the value of it, and they told you to just do it. And what was
Right.
your visceral reaction to that? It was, I don't want to.
Totally. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, that intentionality of coming up with a plan and how you're going to use technology and all of the things that go with that, the operational pathways, how it's going to change how you do things, all of those things certainly, but then how do they use it and practice and understanding the modality that they like to learn in? So maybe it's video, maybe it's written, maybe it's
Mm,
spoken, and then practicing the technology until they've got it.
yeah.
Because I think the other mistake that's often made is that we think about training as one and done. And so you
Mm,
see a class on, you know, iPhone skills, beginner, and somebody attends that class for an hour and they got it in the class, but then they go home and they don't touch their phone again for 3 days, and then they go back and they're like, shoot, how do
right.
I do that?
Yeah.
And so the intentionality of building digital literacy into your plan for your family or your community,
Mhm.
and then having those different kind of marker milestones where they can revisit, get help one-on-one, by video, by voice. um, I think that's really important.
Yeah. A couple of things stood out to me as you were sharing. First, I love that word intentionality. It's one of my favorite words. It just deeply explains the intention behind why we do what we do and are we purposeful in that. It
Mhm.
also reminded me of when you're sharing about why we're doing what we're doing, there's an element of storytelling that came to mind for me as well. How do we tell the story of how this benefits our lives and creates that independence? And it is also ongoing when I think about, how tech is always changing. So we might have taken that one class, but then the systems are updated, new features come out, just how much I'm constantly having to learn technology. So I can't imagine when you don't have as much interaction with it and then need to learn all of these tools, the importance of having that guidance long term.
That's right. That's right. It changes. One of the most common questions I get about our business is, does it have a shelf life?
Mm,
As the boomers start to really come into consideration and what their impact is on communities, I get the question of, is this really just a temporary problem? Like, is there a runway of the next 5 years and then people will come in that are much more comfortable with technology?
mm,
And, we work with a lot of boomers today, and the answer to that is absolutely they need and want and expect the support actually in a different way. They expect that curated
yeah.
experience. But, I think of technology almost like math, and um, the building blocks are really important to the lesson in front of you. And when you're not living with it every day, when you've, earned the right to live your best life in retirement, you don't want to stay on top of the blocks, but
Mm,
you want the blocks that make sense to you.
yeah.
And so, if you miss a particular evolution in technology, then the thing that follows it isn't sometimes as intuitive as one might expect. And so I don't think that there's an end to this. I actually think technology is an infinite thing that will continue to evolve, and people will continue to need patient,
Yeah.
kind support to use it the way that they want to.
Right, right. And with all of that, right, as we're doing something new, there might be some intimidation around it when we learn new technology. How have you found we can best support older adults to overcome maybe some of those hesitancies?
Context, conversation,
Hmm.
allowing them to be, again, the curator of their own tech story. I have so many examples of our team coming back and saying, I have this family and they really want their parent to use online banking, or they really want them to use an Uber, or they really want them to. And the problem with that statement is, does the person on the receiving end of that I want you to want it?
Yeah. Oh, that's
And
a good question.
so, how do you get them really engaged in technology? How do you remove the barriers or the lack of confidence that they feel? You let them define how they want to use it, and then you help them achieve their own goals.
Yeah.
And that's a very personal thing.
It is. With encouraging that independence, right? We want tech to support independence and well-being. There's all these things that are byproducts of us implementing tech into our lives. Do you have any successful examples and the people that you've worked with where you've really seen a shift in almost this evolution of growth for them as they've been able to put some of these tools in place?
I don't know if this completely answers your question, but I do have a favorite story.
Yeah.
So we have a member who has macular degenerative disease, and he's an amazing human, sharp as a whip, still a author, and writes books, and just his mind is just incredible. And there were a couple of things, it really, the relationship had started with him as like tech fix. And so there was a bunch of things on his computer that he wanted to do, and it was fascinating to watch the concierge work with him because his computer, because of the macular degeneration, his
Mm.
every like his cursor was like this big. Like, it was hard to even work on the computer, because he's trying to see. And so the very first thing that we did with him was we put these silicon bumps on his keyboard, which is not a technology solution, but it's on his technology, so
Yeah.
that his common buttons that are his on his keyboard that he used were easy for him to feel.
Mhm.
And then it made him sassy. And then
Ooh,
he
feel
started asking
confident.
yeah, he started asking all these other questions. And so, he was developing and curating his own learning path for things he wanted to learn on the computer. And then it occurred to the concierge that he's so curious, why do we not have an Alexa in his space so that he can ask simple questions? So then We put that in there, and it took him about 3 weeks to learn it, mostly because the impatience of the technology to ask the question succinctly were misaligned. So he needed some practice. So he practiced that. He got that. And then the concierge stumbled in a technology that basically made his monitor. Remember when we were in school and the teachers had those transparent machines and it projected on the
Oh,
wall?
yeah. Yep.
It was basically that for his monitor. And so you installed this technology, it sits on his desk, and then he could slide things underneath it, pictures, whatever, so he could see them on
Yeah.
his screen. And his son called us that night
Wow.
after that got installed, and he said, Vida, the concierge installed this at my dad's house. And he goes, I can't tell you what it's worth for my dad to have gotten a little piece of himself back because his mom had been paying the bills because her husband could no longer see the bills and he couldn't write checks because he couldn't see them. And
Mhm.
this technology enabled him to steal a little piece of himself back.
Oh.
And that, to me, that is what it's all about. It's a perfect example in my mind of how, starting with silicon bumps, he built his confidence. He had
Yeah.
somebody who cared about him looking around the world and discovered something that would be useful for him, got it installed, and he could return to a little bit of a piece of himself that he had lost.
Wow. What an encouraging story.
Yeah,
And it just is like this picture of how that supports that independence and purpose, right? He's able to do the things that he had really cared about.
that's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
You had talked about how part of that is enhancing those social connections, which is a big piece. I mean, I know for me, technology lets me stay connected to people from around the world that I care about. And it fosters that social connection, especially, older adults who may be isolated, live in more remote areas. How are you seeing the role of technology enhancing these ways for us to connect?
Gosh, there's so much out there.
Mm.
And I want to go back to something I said earlier. I don't think technology is a proxy for human relationship. And I think that's very important in this digital age for us to remember that. I think of technology as a tool to amplify. And so, for example, in a senior center that we worked with, they do classes on chair yoga.
Mm.
And it's their most popular class and it always fills up. And so we taught the members there to do chair yoga at home in between classes. And
Mhm.
so using technology as a means to amplify your interest in a particular exercise or teaching them, social media so that they can stay up to date on their family's pictures or teaching them about social media that their grandkids are using because there's a new way of communicating with them.
Mhm.
And I'll give you a personal example. My mom was really frustrated because she was calling my daughter and son and they weren't returning the calls. And she would try to text them, but they weren't always returning those either. Now you could think, gosh, Vida, why don't you raise kids that respond to their grandparents? Um, but that's not where they live. They
Yeah.
live in Snapchat and Instagram.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I taught my mom how to DM them, and
Love it.
they get back to her in 30 seconds. It's just where they exist.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so using technology to amplify connections, whether that be to a community, a religious organization. I have a lot of members in our orbit that attend church through technology or go to synagogue through technology, or teaching them how to, connect with multi-generations in their family with it is a really wonderful way to amplify your connection with your loved ones. But again, it's not the proxy for human
Yeah.
connection.
Oh, I love that perspective so much. That's
Yeah,
why we just like talking with each other.
yeah, yeah. So
Oh, and
intentional.
that term, yeah, that amplify. That's such a good descriptive word of what that is. It
Yeah.
really is. Yeah. And with all that's available, right? And how personal it is. And all that's coming at us, it's constantly evolving. How do we stay up to date without feeling overwhelmed? How do you suggest we do that? Or is it just we're going to perpetually be like, so much is out there?
Yeah, I mean that's such a hard question to answer, and I don't know that I have the perfect answer. It's frankly why we exist is to
Mhm.
try to curate this experience for people based on how they want to live their lives and then how technology can serve that. It's hard. There is so much, and there's really great stuff, and there's a lot of junk too. And so, I think about the time that I spent at CES and in the Age Tech Collaborative, but even beyond that. And there's so much noise.
Mhm.
And so if I feel that way, imagine how you feel as an
Oh,
older adult.
yeah. Yeah. Or even someone in the tech space and someone not in the tech space, right? I mean, it's just
1000%.
so much. Yeah.
But
Even,
there's so much curiosity, which is interesting to me. Like every single group we work with has asked their concierge, what happened at CES? What was interesting?
mm,
Because they see it. They
yeah.
see that technology is going to continue to advance, and it's their way of trying to stay on top of it. But
Yeah.
and there's a lot of resources out there. There's websites, and there's certainly the AARPs of the world that are turning up the volume on technology. Um, so there's a lot you can do to try to stay up to date, but it is an avalanche. So having a partner that is interested in that can make recommendations can be
Yeah.
really cool.
So helpful. Yes, you and I were both at CES and seeing all that's available. I mean, it's so exciting. And, there was such a focus on aging services, age tech, things that can make our life better, easier, more supported in every capacity, right? From healthy living to cognitive engagement to physical support. What am I missing? I mean,
Oh my gosh,
oh
there's
my
so
God, so
much
much.
stuff
Yeah.
about it. But what's missing is the thread between all of them.
Mm,
And
yeah,
so I was walking around thinking to myself, this is the challenge for communities.
right, right.
um, is how do these things all work together to create this kind of holistic experience that doesn't feel fragmented, that does work together, that residents understand. And so, reimagining operational pathways, understanding and having intentionality around where you're trying to go in the next 3 to 5 years, and beyond is an important part of the process to understand what elements of technology you should be thinking about
Right,
pulling into your communities. And
right.
that's hard. That's a lot of work.
It is hard. Do you guide communities or families on that same notion, right? Okay, if we're looking at the landscape of our goals in the next few years of what we want to accomplish, is that something that you also can support operators in communities, families of looking at that?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's about, just kind of thinking through the various stages of a human experience and then how technology can help with that and really understanding, what you're trying to achieve and then implementing it. And I think where we can be really powerful is on the implementation side of building not only resident engagement,
Mhm.
but also community and staff engagement, so that they know how to make the shift when technology comes into their environment. Because what I see happening a lot is technology gets purchased and it gets implemented and it
Mhm.
seems fine. But then when you get down to the frontline staff, the maintenance team, the front desk teams, the activity directors, the restaurant leadership, I'm like, well, okay, now we have this, but I'm also going to continue to print everything out. And now I'm doing it twice.
Right,
And
right.
so, getting buy-in at every level, staff and resident, is really important. Recreating those operational pathways, creating the context so people understand the value to them and why you're doing this,
Yeah.
and then helping them along the path and learning how to do something a new way is really important, and
Yeah.
and we can help there.
Oh, completely. And you and I had had a conversation about that. How can we better align the strategies and timing of the tech industry with the needs of senior living communities and older adults and caregivers? The importance of the continuous conversation about technology. So, how do we do that effectively? Because, in our conversation, you and I were sharing about how tech is on its timeline, right? Innovation is happening, but yet where we're implementing that has its own timeline and budget and how they want to do that. So where do we find alignment between the two?
It's the most stark difference that I experienced moving from the tech industry to the older adult industry.
Mhm.
Um, Technology companies plan by the quarter and sometimes even monthly.
Yeah.
always money to be had. There's always the ability to shift things around and make a left turn when you were planning to make a right. And the senior living industry is not like that. They make their decisions once a year. It's usually in October, November. They're having their discussions by December, January. They've decided, and then they're implementing. And so that very kind of strict kind of evaluation of things is so misaligned with the technology space.
Right.
That's constantly changing and evolving. And so I think finding a way to build thought leadership into your organization and being deliberate about considering technology throughout the year and finding pockets to make space for that. I mean, I am talking to one of the most innovative guys I think I've ever met from a technology perspective. I mean, he's brilliant, but the amount of pressure that he has on him to execute his day-to-day, to manage his P&L, to make, create savings where savings need to exist, create advancements where they need to. He's just so overloaded. And
Yeah.
so, he was sharing, he's like, I get 3,000 emails a week. I can't even think about that. And so I think creating those pockets and understanding, technology is open 24/7, 365 days in the year. Whereas, senior living more opens up their doors for a quarter. You got to chop that up. And we've got to be talking about that innovation throughout the year and connecting the dots to where it is you're trying to go as a community, and then making the right choices. And so, like a lot of times, technology will start off with a bang and they'll do something big, like let's say a resident engagement platform
Right.
or some sort of Alexa smart properties solution. But what's after that? Where are you going? Where are you putting that in there? What's your long-term goal?
Mhm.
And then talking to technology companies throughout the year and kind of creating your plan for who are you going to consider, come decision making time and making sure that you're pulling that full story in to
Mm.
make those considerations. It's just,
Yeah.
it's so misaligned. I don't know how to.
No, that perfectly describes it, really. And, I think in our conversation, you were saying, tech wants the conversation all the time because it's constantly changing. And then when we're looking at, an implementation for just that one pocket of time, how do we do that effectively? And I think that's where the challenge is. And something I've really been trying to share is that there's this whole care economy that's happening, technology space. My listeners can't see my hands on this one side over here. And on the other side, we have, older adults and family caregivers and senior living, and they are managing the day to day, but want solutions to the problems that they're having. And there's not a huge intersect, there's more so now, but I think it would be just so wonderful to see. And some communities do this, but having someone that really has a hand on the pulse of what's happening in the care economy, curate all these support systems and technologies that are available. So when not only families and residents request that, senior living can easily identify what the need is, be able to quickly innovate and implement rather than waiting so much time and then risk that resident and family satisfaction dwindling because we're not meeting the needs that are requested at that moment. I think there's a lot of that too.
And it's not just about the deployment. It's goes far beyond the deployment. So you think about, what technology is saying to the world is we can make it easier, simpler, faster, more scalable, save you money, blah, blah, blah. Only if they use it. So
Right. Because you don't want to go through all of that then if it's not even.
that's right. It's
Yeah.
only if they use it. And so what are your plans there? And can you sustain that change and help your community make that turn, help your loved one make that turn?
Mhm.
Because you can buy all the technology in the world, really stinks when you open a drawer and you find it in there. And that is failed digital literacy when you see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, completely. And it really is, you brought up that term of that adoption, but the main barriers to behavior change and technology adoption, that's what it comes down to is redefining how we show up in our behavior. So how do we address that? That's a big question, but
Yeah.
any insights into that?
you change the behavior through practice,
Mm,
uh, but also through context of people understanding why it's valuable. And I think that staff and residents in particular need and deserve that context of why technology is being implemented. And they have to buy into the value and see it. And if they don't, then I think you'll always be challenged. And you'll have people voting with their feet.
right, right.
I also think it's important, like I gotta go back to the not a proxy for human. Like
Mm,
you also have there's so much, conversation about technology creating scale and simplicity and kind of passive monitoring. And
mhm.
I truly, truly hope that that time gained is used back to creating more meaningful human relationships, just
Yeah,
eyeball to eyeball with people, because that's what you need to be freeing up is the ability to do that when you're investing
right,
in these tech
right.
solutions.
Yeah, and I'm sure too, there's more requests for how is this data supporting alleviating so caregivers can feel that they have the time and capacity to be in those human moments, right? So
Yeah.
being able to tie that together.
Yeah, I just was talking to a gent that was talking about passive, can't remember what the specific technology was that he was looking at, but kind of this passive monitoring of residents with high risk.
Mm,
And his intent in using that is not only to know if people are getting out of bed, but to be able to proactively send somebody into the room to be helpful
mm,
in a way that lets them maintain their dignity, and that's a great use of that kind of technology because it will retarget his team to be more impactful, with residents and have a higher touch with them, which I think is wonderful.
in the data, what are you seeing as kind of the average adoption rate, so to speak, of and I'm sure there's a range.
Yeah, of technology, like a
Mhm.
resident engagement platform, something like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Gosh, it's all over the map. I mean, I've heard as low. I almost fell out of my chair, Nicole. Activity director was telling me that he had 15% engagement on the resident engagement platform, and they felt
Wow.
good about that. And it was like there were a lot of complexities behind that. They weren't
Yeah.
providing the devices. Not everybody had device. Like there was context to that.
Mhm.
But 15%, like, come
Yeah.
on.
Right.
And as high as 80. It depends on the community and it depends on the residents and their willingness to be open and how they launch it into the community. But I was just talking to a group that we're working with today. I was talking to their director of operations. This is actually an active aging community and we're setting up concierge desk on their site. And one of the things she said to me was, can your concierge deal with this app I just launched? I mean, their average age is 57 years old in their
Mhm.
community because the way that they're built, most people have second homes there and then they ultimately end up retiring there. And so
Right.
there's services behind that. It's basically real estate, right?
Mhm.
And she goes, we launched this app to make it easier to book tea times and, schedule into the restaurants that we have on site or learn about activities. She goes, 40% of our time is being taken up by this app. They don't even know how to download it.
Oh,
So,
interesting. Yeah.
so the adoption's all over the map, and it's not, just 70-year-olds that are having this problem. It's, people in their mid to late 50s. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't have time to deal with this. Like especially if the interface isn't great.
Right.
Then so it just depends. I mean, we commonly hear between 30 and 60% adoption in communities. Some are more successful and some are not.
Right, depending on culture and who's leadership and all of that. Yeah, behavior change.
Right.
Yeah, all of those circumstances. Well, and technology is that physical product and we want to make that physically accessible. How do we also ensure that it's cognitively and emotionally accessible as well? Because that's a whole nother piece of it.
You have to listen and you have to observe where somebody is at
Mhm.
and meet them there. It's not one size fits all. You can't kind of park everybody in the same starting line, and and then teach them. They may not be comfortable with technology. It may be frightening to them. It may be, overwhelming to them. And some may be further along than others. And when you're in those group situations and you're trying to teach people who are all at a different starting line, people often walk out feeling like they didn't get what they needed because, somebody that had either not enough knowledge or too much knowledge really drove the discussion and didn't get to answer the questions that they had. And so, to me, it all starts with listening. And, even as I say it, I run into a lot of people like, how is this scalable? Like,
Mm.
can't you just create some AI and deal with it that way? Like, it's just too hard to scale something like this with this kind of human connection. And, is it easy? No. Is it the
Mm.
cheapest way to do it? No. Is it necessary? Yes. You have to have that human connection and help people learn to use technology and start from wherever they're at.
So good. Family caregivers, professional caregivers, they play such a role in fostering that tech literacy and confidence in our older adults. What are some key steps? Like, how do we solve the digital divide for people in our lives, especially when there is such a rapid evolution of technology?
Yeah, I think it's about being patient, asking questions, and not infantilizing people.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting dynamic that I see that happens when people are talking about older adults and technology.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know how else to describe it.
Oh, that
Infantilized.
is the right term. Yeah, absolutely.
Their reaction is like the feeling that I think people get is you don't think I'm smart enough to get this, or you don't think I'm interested, but I am, and I hear a lot of feedback from people I've worked with that say, people just want to fix it for me. They don't want to teach it to me,
Mhm.
or I feel uncomfortable asking my kids for this kind of help. And so it's important for caregivers and loved ones who are helping their older adults with technology to be patient and kind, but also kind of respect their experience and respect the experience they want to have with technology. And as curious as the curiosity that's being pushed toward them, that's encouraging the learning or the teaching or the opening the mind to this technology, recognize the trade in that and their experience and their what they bring to the table. They started this whole technology revolution. I like to remind people of that.
Oh, I love
um,
that reminder. Yeah.
yeah, they brought in the phones and the TVs and all of the appliances and all of the technology that started this revolution. And sometimes they need to be reminded of that. And
Yeah.
so I treat them with the respect and dignity that they deserve.
Thank you. Such a good reminder. It's so true.
Yeah.
How are you encouraged as you look ahead at what's happening in the care economy, the tech innovations?
I mean, there was just this frisson, at CES of all of the advancements that are being done for people who need accessibility because of, hearing or vision impairments, or, AI is obviously a wonderful innovation that will change, the way that we communicate with each other. There's the health management and tracking and like putting people into a position of control over their own lives and the data that will help them make better decisions. All of that's super exciting to me. I think it's going to continue to evolve how we care for one another. But again, I'll just say only if we use it. And so, helping people traverse that path and build that comfort is super important.
Oh, so important. So, where can we learn more? Tell us more about the Smarter Service,
Yeah,
and we'll include all of that in our episode description so people can connect with you as well.
that's great. Yeah, you can learn more about us. We have a website at www.thesmarterservice.com. Or you can always just email me at vida@thesmarterservice.com. I'd love to chat about how we can help.
Thank you so much. I just love our conversations.
Yeah.
Looking forward to more. So happy to support the work that you're doing. And thank you for being here with me today. It's been great.
Thank you, Nicole. You're a wonderful soul. I enjoyed our time.
Are you looking for more support and community? We sure are. That is why I'm so happy to highlight one of my favorite podcasts in the caregiving community, Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver, hosted by my friends and sisters Natalie Elliott Handy and JJ Elliott Hill. They offer a unique blend of personal storytelling, expert advice, and candid conversations that shed light on the real-life challenges and triumphs that caregivers face. Tune in to Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver wherever you enjoy your podcasts, or explore more on their website at www.confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.